Have you ever had that feeling, deep down, that you're living a life that isn't really yours? You know, like you're just going through the motions? Well, we're about to dive into a 1600-year-old poem that hits that feeling right on the head. It's a story about quitting the rat race, written centuries before that phrase even existed. Yeah, it's that feeling of total burnout, right? The endless meetings, the pressure to perform. It's like being caught in what one poet so perfectly called a dusty net. And what's amazing is this isn't some new modern problem. It's a timeless struggle between who we really are and the roles we feel like we have to play. So, the poet who came up with this incredible metaphor was Tao Yuanming. He was a civil servant back in 4th century China. And let me tell you, he lived this conflict every single day. His job demanded one thing, but his soul was screaming for something else entirely. And what makes him so incredible is he actually listened to it. Now, this wasn't some snap decision. I mean, think about it. For 13 long years, he tried to make it work, moving from one unsatisfying government job to the next. But then, he finally hit his breaking point. After just over 80 days as a local magistrate, he just walked away. He famously said he would not bend his back for 5 pecks of rice. Basically, he chose his own soul over a paycheck. This massive life change is what inspired his most famous series of poems called Returning to the Farm to Dwell. So let's get into the very first one, where he just lays it all out, the core conflict that was tearing him apart. He kicks off the poem with this incredible line. First, just listen to the sound of it in the original Chinese. 少无是俗韵，性本爱 Q 山. In English, it translates to something like, from youth, I was out of tune with the world. My nature always loved the hills and mountains. I just love that phrase, 世俗韵. It's like saying you don't have the rhythm for worldly tunes. You just can't dance that dance. He's saying right from the start, this was never me. And because he was so out of tune, he felt completely trapped. The very next line he writes is this. 孤落尘网中，一去30年, which means, by mistake, I fell into the dusty net and was gone from my true self for 30 years. Now you might be thinking, hold on, didn't the timeline say 13 years? And you're right. That's the power of poetry. He's not giving us a historical fact. He's telling us how it felt. Those 13 years felt like a soul-crushing 30. And this metaphor, the chengwang, the dusty net, it is so brilliant. It's not just about having a bad job. It's this idea of being tangled up in a system that feels fake, trivial, and suffocating, a system that covers everything in this thick layer of dust, so you can't even see what's real and true anymore. And to really make us feel it, he gives us these 2 perfect images. First, he compares himself to a jinyao, a caged bird that just dreams of its home in the forest. And then, to a churyu, a fish stuck in a tiny little pond, missing the deep, vast waters it came from. You can just feel that sense of confinement, can't you? So he breaks free from the net. And this is where the poem just totally shifts gears. It moves beautifully from the prison of his past life to the paradise he's building in the present. He starts painting this vivid picture of his new home, a place that is the absolute opposite of that dusty net. First up, he describes his plot of land. He says, my patch of land is more than 10 acres square. It's not some grand estate, but it's his. It's a real place where he can finally, put down some roots. And on this land, his house is a simple, thatched cottage of 8 or 9 rooms. You can just picture it, right? It's humble, it's earthy. The value here isn't in money, but in its deep, fundamental connection to the natural world. Then he starts adding these beautiful little details. Imagine the back of the cottage being shaded by elms and willows, and then the front lined with peach and plum trees. See, it's not just a house anymore. It's a sanctuary that's literally woven into the landscape. Then the camera sort of pans out, and he shows us the world that surrounds his little haven. Listen to this. 哀哀燕远孙，依依虚里烟. A distant village, hazy and indistinct. From the hamlet, smoke drifts, soft and slow. It's just like a watercolor painting, isn't it? You get this feeling of a gentle community nearby, but it's at a comfortable, peaceful distance. No one's crowding him. But this peaceful painting isn't silent. That would be lifeless. So to really bring this scene to life, Tao Yuanming fills it with the simple sounds of home. This is the soundtrack of his new freedom. He writes, 狗吠深上中，鸡鸣桑树颠. A dog barks from a deep lane. A rooster crows from a mulberry treetop. It's the simple, everyday music of the countryside. And that is exactly the point. Think for a second about the sounds he doesn't hear anymore. There's no more shouting of officials, no chaotic noise of the city. Instead, you get a dog's bark or a rooster's crow. These are the sounds of a world that's alive, but also at peace with itself. It's the difference between distracting noise and true harmony. Okay, so he's shown us his new world. The land, the home, the sounds. Now he brings it all home and tells us what this really means, what the big takeaway is. He writes, "In my courtyard, no dust of the world." See? He's finally shaken off that dusty net. And what did he find once it was gone? In my quiet room, a surplus of leisure. And that doesn't just mean free time to do nothing. It means a deep internal peace, an abundance of quiet for the soul. And all of that brings us to the poem's final, triumphant line. This is the heart of his entire journey. Listen to this. 只有在樊笼里，复得返自然. For so long, I was trapped in a cage. Now, I can return to my own nature. Did you catch that? He doesn't call it a net anymore. He calls it a cage, 樊笼. That's how intense the feeling of confinement really was. This journey wasn't just about changing his address. It was about reclaiming his very self. So in the end, it's a story of two completely different worlds. On one side, you have the cage. That's the dusty net of duty, of expectations, of living a life that just isn't authentic. But on the other side, you have the garden, a life of simplicity, freedom, and the spiritual act of just returning to who you were meant to be. And here we are 1,600 years later, and that journey from the cage to the garden feels more relevant than it ever has. It leaves all of us with a really big question to think about. In our own lives, with our own dusty nets, what would it really mean for us to return to our true nature?